to go ahead and get started. This will be a panel format this afternoon. The way it will work, I'll start off with a few comments and just general housekeeping details, and then we'll go down the line for the presentation. And then at the end, we're going to have a fireside chat. Stay inspired. But it's going to be just an open discussion, and you can ask questions of any of the panelists at that point. There are continuing education credits if you need to sign in for those. I'm just going to pass this sign-in sheet around. If you want to, you can put your name on that. Just a couple opening comments. From the discussion this morning with Bill, he talked about that involuntary response, and I'm very fortunate. I work for Linn County Conservation. We manage about 7,000 acres, 27 different areas, and so I get to be in open green space quite a bit. But I do have an office that I spend far too much time in. But my office has a window that looks out over a wetland and a woodland and a little bit of grassland there. And there's bird feeders right out the window. So I get that involuntary thing happening once in a while where something catches my eye. I'm kind of used to the woodpeckers. You know, they're there all the time, the little downies and harries and the other birds that come to the feeders. But this spring, I had these cargo jets of the bird world fly by my window, and it was out of my chair looking around the corner trying to get a glimpse, and it was a pair of sandhill cranes that flew right by, and it was just so awesome, and to have that experience. And it does help you go back and direct your thoughts so that that involuntary helps you follow up and be able to really direct your thoughts. I didn't realize until today that we're actually dispensing a Ritalin or a Ritalin placebo in our park. So that's a great thing. There's a couple of things that I've observed over the years. One is trails. When I started, I've been at Linn County for 34 years, and I'm very close to 35 years. And when I started, the Cedar Valley Nature Trail was just in the discussion phases. And if any of you were around for that, it was very controversial. Not in my backyard. I don't want this to happen. Once the trail was acquired, we had people burning bridges and pulling car bodies out on the trail to try to stop it. Planks with spikes sticking up so that people would get flat tires when we took vehicles down. All those types of things, so it was very controversial. And just thinking about trails in the past 34 years, that thought process has largely changed. It's still difficult to sometimes make those final connections. But we see advertisements now in the paper that house is located near the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, or house is located near this trail or that trail, because it's an amenity that many, many people want and gives them an easy escape. Close to people and connecting people to where they want to go is really, really important, and to make that backbone. So the Cedar Valley Nature Trail has become the backbone of the trail system through Linn County. It runs from Benton County all the way through to Hiawatha. It becomes the Cedar River Trail, but they're connected. The Cedar River Trail then goes all the way through downtown Cedar Rapids to the south side of Cedar Rapids, where it turns into the Hoover Trail and goes to Ely. Very soon it will go to the Johnson County line, and Johnson County is working to connect that on into North Liberty, Coralville, and Iowa City. So what an amazing thing. I mean, 35 years is a long time, but at least things are happening and they're moving forward. And so trails in general have become easier to do, I think, and something that people appreciate, and gives us that ready connection to the natural world as well. So a very positive thing over the past few years. Another positive thing, looking at the lifelong learning, we operate Wiki Uphill. Jan's here from Indian Creek Nature Center, and we're really partners in this lifelong learning thing, and especially trying to get people connected to the natural world. And they've got an amazing project going on in Some Amazing Spaces, the name of it, but Wiki Uphill is a great facility kind of on the northwest side of Linn County. Indian Creek on the southeast side of Cedar Rapids, but both engaged in getting people connected to the natural world at a very early age, and then we also do adult programming as well. So a really exciting thing happening here, and again, that opportunity to work together with Indian Creek on that piece of it. So those are my introductory comments from Linn County Conservation perspective, and now we want to start off with the panelists. I'm just going to let them introduce themselves, and the ground rules will be that we're going to let the panelists all go through before we ask questions, and then we do have a homework assignment. At the very end, we're supposed to record 3 to 5 kind of common threads that come out of this discussion that we would like to share with the rest of the group when we reconvene. So we'll save about 10 minutes at the end or so to get that accomplished. So we're going to start off with Scott, I believe, and I'll just let each of the panelists introduce themselves.
All right, thank you. I'm not sure if there's text at the end of the picture, so if you get the text, you can just go backwards through the pictures. We were trying to get a time so that while I'm talking, you can see some pictures of my work, but she's going to be my timer manually while we're doing this. So, goodness gracious, thank you so much for letting me have a bit of your time right now. My name is Scott Koepke. If you go back one slide, you'll see the logo.
I hit it.
Oh, you hit it. That's fine. No, you don't have to. It's Soilmates. A new Pioneer Food Co-op sponsors me to do this outreach to children. After the Peace Corps, I went to Senegal in the west coast of Africa. I got very passionate about teaching kids how to grow food. But before we can grow food, we got to grow soil. And so my passion is soil science, and I get to go to 40 schools in the corridor and teach 5 content areas: gardening, soil science, compost, life skills, and local food economies. And so I'm just blessed to be able to do, as I referenced over here, many school garden projects, food waste management projects, seed saving, little seed libraries, like you see little free book libraries. I'm working on a project to have free seed libraries right in neighborhoods. And a little thing I'm doing called Small Food, which is just like Lemonade Stand 2.0, where instead of growing lemonade, you grow food. And I talked to a kid at Franklin Middle School last week after I got done talking. He's like, yeah, I made $1,300 last year just selling strawberries and sweet corn to my neighbors. Like, that's what I'm saying. Refocus the energy right where you live. And in terms of food waste management, when I go home today, I'm going to have buckets of food waste on my porch because my neighbors know that I'll take it from them. I don't expect you all to do it, but there are those of us who will do it for you. Okay? So those are some of my projects. And I'm also going to be a production consultant. I am right now for a hunger relief farm. We grew 2 acres of vegetables for the homeless population in Iowa City. And so that's a very rewarding life skill I want to talk about in a second, because I want to drill down the life skills. Statistically, I'm in about 40 schools a year, 300 classes, 10,000 kids. One guy. School assemblies and individual classes. And I get in my worm wagon and I just go around and do my show. And I'm just so blessed. I'm so blessed. I'm so honored, by the way, to have listened to Dr. Sullivan this morning, both of the keynotes, but especially Dr. Sullivan's research, because I come here for inspiration. I come for affirmation. And everything I was just sitting back going, oh my God, I might be making a difference. Like this stuff, because he's backed it up. I'm just anecdotal. This guy gives me hardcore data on what I'm doing is healing. It's therapy. It's healing. My goodness gracious. And I get emotional really easy, so if I cry, just be forewarned. The life skill focus. Let me show, when I go to a lower, especially at risk, and I don't even like the moniker at risk anymore. We're all at risk. Okay. I'm going to give you 10 of them. I can take a kid out here to the garden and teach you 10 critical life skills in no order of importance. And I boil it down to just for sake of ease. Balance, respect, patience, nurturance. I'm going to come back to that one. Resilience, healthy choices, trust, humility, listening, and gratitude. These are 10 life skills that I can teach in the outdoor classroom, and I do. And I've seen it heal people. Nurturance, transference. That's if I was to do a PhD, if I was to do a paper for you, it would focus on the evidence. I don't care if it's a baby brother or a puppy or a plant. When you learn how to nurture something and take care of something, you're subconsciously and consciously, you're learning the act of caring. You're learning how to take care of yourself, and it all starts here, and then it ripples out into your community. So to just see the trauma shed off of people's lives, in my experience after doing this for many years, to see them come into a garden project and see people heal. Goodness. And my primary message is beyond the life skill stuff. So it's not just about food. It's way deeper than food. And way deeper than soil, no pun intended. This is about, but my first message is soil first. So I always get up with the kids. Soil first, then we have plants, then we have food and oxygen, and then we're here today. But if we don't take care of the soil first, none of us are here today. What does it mean to take care? In a forum about health and learning, taking care, I'll just boil it down to one thing. Don't pollute your body, don't pollute the soil, okay? There are things we can do to help ourselves or hurt ourselves. Let's learn about, I work with mostly pre-K through 2nd and 3rd grade. That's just because that's where most of the schools are. But if I can help establish a healthy habit at that age, with an understanding fundamentally of I'm making choices about what to put in my body, and we need to think about the choices that we're putting into the soil, we can help it or hurt it. Little kids, we talk about, are you making a helping choice or a hurting choice? Are you learning to give a little more than you take? That to me is how I define sustainability with kids on Earth Day. If all you do is take, you run out. Okay? Goodness, I'm going to have to fly through this. Sorry. Biodiversity and balance, another fundamental tenet of my teaching. The extent to which you enhance diversity in the system. I don't care if it's your diet, your investment portfolio, your ecosystem. You sacrifice balance in the system if you sacrifice diversity in that system. Building community by building soil is the moniker on my email. And when I do Biochem 101 for little kids, for botany, I'm introducing organic chemistry concepts to kindergartners when I talk about the decomposition of organic matter, the little critters and worms eating all that old waste, to yield chemically available nutrients for roots to absorb with a sponge I use and all kinds of props. I just introduced Biochem 101 for botany to a kindergartner. We don't give them enough credit for what they can handle if it's taught properly. When I was a kid, we had a unit called Man versus Nature. Boom. You know, it's not about man versus nature. It's we are nature. You don't fight nature. And I'm not dissing my junior high school teachers. They were just teaching what they were taught. But now we have a different pedagogy in that regard. And then the most profound one for me is that when my dad died a few years ago, I was teaching a class right after the funeral, and I look at this bucket of garbage for compost, and I realized, and this is also, everything is emotional today. I looked at this and it struck me. I was like, that's not dying. And I told the kids, you don't have to be scared of it anymore. You know, this stuff that's decomposing and dying, this old garbage, and then I bring out the beautiful finished compost. I said, this yuck turned into this new life. Life, death, new life. What could be more profound in learning than taking a bucket of garbage and teaching a life skill lesson about that type of thing? You know, I'm so blessed. I worked as a consultant with Dr. Jans and Dr. Mellon. And one time I did a study with the University of Iowa College of Public Health. They had me go to 2 school garden projects, and we crunched the data. Does a school garden have is there a direct causal link between that school garden and greater nutrition? And there is. Okay? That balanced diet that you put in your tummy, you will eat better if you introduce children to that. Okay, not to mention, again, the life skills. Nurturance, transference. Lots of seeds don't come up. Some lay dormant, but I plant them anyway. We all need to keep planting. Grandma said, before she died, plant a tree and be nice. That sums it up. And the curriculum integration of taking all the core curriculum, math, science, literacy, of course, the STEM stuff, I can teach out in the outdoor classroom with lesson plans up the wazoo. But I can also teach, like I say, these life skill lessons. I can teach, oh my goodness, bringing in, you know, and I see a lot of food waste. I see a lot of good food just tossed in the garbage. That's why you can lead a horse to water and a kid to veggies. That doesn't mean they're going to eat them. So we have to also, as educators, come up with ways of keeping that food in them consistently. And that's why I try to bring in chefs. Thank you. Bring in chefs to have fun recipes, to introduce them into just a new habit of eating. You know, our tongues are addicted. Our culture is addicted to processed salt, sugar, and fat. And it's really hard to break that addiction. And my sister's joke said on my gravestone is just going to say 3 words: eat your veggies. That's all. Okay. So the core curriculum can be integrated, but you can also go to a resource like lifelab.org. I'll be speaking again at the National Farm to School Conference in June in Madison. And one of my topics is it's called Avoiding the Weed Patch, School Garden Failures and What We Can Learn from Them. Because labor is an issue that we all have to rally around and realize it's easy to start something, but how are we going to sustain this for the long run with an institutional expectation in budgets and policy? And this is what gets back to what Dr. Sullivan was also talking about too, this the biophilic stuff with policymakers, because I got my foot in a lot of different doors, and one of them is working with policymakers. Are you institutionalizing this in the infrastructure of your policy? And more importantly, are you line iteming it in your budget? This is a priority for me as a taxpayer. I want this to be supported publicly with it in the budget. And right now, it's mainly just private interest, like me running around doing my own private thing. But let's make it more of a public interest. And I'll wrap up with a quick story. Because when I get depressed, and I can get pretty depressed, easy and cynical about the way the world is going, especially after I read The Sixth Extinction this summer. I was like, I got done with her book and I was like, oh man, we're screwed. And I can't put my energy there. Why do I get up every morning and work with children in the garden if I was just going to give up and say that we're screwed? No, we're not. And we're all making a big difference with little small acts lead to profound impacts when we all do little tiny things. And I'll just close by telling you a quick story that happened to me just last week. Right here at Johnson, in Cedar Rapids, at Johnson Elementary School, a little girl, let me check my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. A little girl, probably second grade, she's sitting in the back of the class, she's profoundly autistic. And I'm going through my spiel, and she's facing, if you can imagine, she's facing away from us, in the back, just rocking on the floor. And the teacher said, just let her go. And I just started talking about seeds and soil and worms and my grandma's hand plow and helping and hurting choices. And slowly but surely, this little girl started to turn around. And she got up. And she started walking towards me and put her hand up. And I said, yeah, sweetie, what did you want to ask me? Or what did you want to say? And everyone else was I was grateful that the other kids were being polite to her, which said a lot about the teacher. She said, I just want you to know that my mom grows vegetables and we compost at home. And I said, it just broke my heart, obviously. But you guys, the teacher said it was the first time in weeks that she had ever spoken. And I connected with her over a message of nurturance. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah, let's start with that.
Do you find yourself longing for the apocalypse? I did. I was looking for a reason to live. Hi. Are you feeling tired, irritable, stressed out? What you might consider nature.
From the people's environment, getting outside, comes prescription strength nature. No one
That's awesome.
Nature is recommended for humans of all ages. Too.
Nature can reduce cynicism, meaninglessness, anal retentiveness, and nervousness. Nature is proven to decrease work-induced catatonia.
Caution. Nature may cause you to slow down, quit your job, or seriously consider what the you're doing.
We need to increase nature. You can being even mildly uncomfortable. Nature may not be right for you. That may include spontaneous euphoria, taking yourself for no apparent reason.
So ask your doctor if nature is right for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, so we go from crying to laughing. But yeah, I love that. And it's actually, it's going around the country right now. It's a pretty popular video, and it's made to try to, use humor to get people more engaged in this idea, and I think it works. So I just wanted to share that before we start off. I'm a psychologist. I have my Ph.D. in counseling psychology, and I'm in private practice in Iowa City at Anderson, Arnold and Partners. And so I'm also going to talk mostly about my anecdotal evidence, just as a practitioner, seeing lots of individuals, adolescents, adults, couples, and why I prescribe nature and have seen that to be a really beneficial thing to my clients in their lives. So, you know, my training as a psychologist, they don't talk about ecotherapy, nature prescribing, green therapy. This is something I had to kind of find on my own, based on, you know, my own experience. When I'm, you know, stressed or struggling, I feel better when I go for a walk or get outside or look out the window. And so, you know, using that to kind of help my clients connect with that when they're struggling with whatever they're bringing in the door as well. It seemed to be working. And now I think we're getting more and more support, research being done that, you know, shows that all these things are really helpful too. So I want to talk a little bit about my clinical experience, what I kind of see, what I prescribe to folks, and some of the research that backs that up today. In the hope that, you know, all of you can, you know, think about these things for yourself and maybe encourage them for your family as well, or even ask your doctor about them. There are so many people that come to my office on lots and lots of psychotropic medications for depression, anxiety, whatever symptoms they're experiencing. And it's gotten really frustrating over time to see all the negative side effects of those prescriptions that my clients experience. And so, you know, this seems like a better alternative without the negative side effects, and we've got research now to back it up that it can be as powerful as antidepressant medications to improve mood, improve functioning, even improve relationships, attention, focus, memory, all these things that folks were talking about earlier today. So when I prescribe nature, it looks lots of different ways, and it's things that people have been talking about already, I think. So folks who come to my office, maybe they've been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, have trauma experiences and background in very traumatic experiences growing up, or in their current relationships, having difficulty communicating. They have physical symptoms, headaches, GI symptoms, nausea, they feel jittery, anxious, trouble focusing, attention. There's all this stuff people are kind of presenting to me, and, you know, getting out and outside, moving, and being out in green spaces. You know, like I said, more and more evidence that can be helpful for a number of different things. So for example, there was a study done at Stanford, I believe, looked at brain scans for folks, and the reduced activity in the area of the brain that is linked to risk of mental illness in participants who took a 90-minute walk among the oaks. And so, you know, we can see actual changes in the brain when folks are out in green spaces, walking, moving. They report lower levels of negative rumination, which is that self-talk we can get into when we're struggling with mood, with anxiety. Another study over in the UK found that folks who are just living within a half a mile of wooded areas experience less anxiety and depression in general. A walk in the country has been found to reduce depression in 71% of the participants in the study in the UK as well. As well as 5 minutes in a backyard or green space to improve mood, self-esteem, motivation. And what we know, exercise in and of itself is a great thing, and it's been found to be as effective as any antidepressant medication for mood, but we get a 12% boost in mood when we're walking outdoors. And so, you know, I'm encouraging my clients to get moving, and especially get moving in green spaces, and hopefully with people as well. It helps with interpersonal relationships. We know that people do a better job communicating with each other when they're walking, and so I might encourage a couple who's having a hard time talking about a tough issue, or a father and son who need to have a difficult conversation, to go take a walk together and try talking about it that way. And again, there's research to back this up, that this is a more effective way of getting these interpersonal disputes sorted out. You mentioned grief, Scott. I work with clients who are, you know, struggle with a lot of loss in their life, maybe spiritual, existential concerns. Getting out into nature helps with that as well, I think, in terms of feeling connected to something larger, keeping things in perspective. And so folks with those sorts of presenting issues, you know, I can prescribe some of that for them as well. See a lot of adolescents and college students on medication for ADHD and attention issues. So again, more and more research is, you know, out there now to show that green space, getting outside and moving, get out from in front of that screen that we're all in front of so often, can help improve those things as well. So encouraging clients very specifically, you know, to 5 times a week, we're going to go take a 20-minute walk in the park and try to get as specific as possible, read descriptive behaviorally what I'd like to be doing to see the most benefit in these sorts of symptoms. And I have a brief story I wanted to share too about a client I've recently worked with who was just debilitated by OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder, up in her head all the time with these obsessions, and then engaged in all these behaviors, compulsive behaviors, to try to manage those obsessive thoughts. And so being in her body and in her mind was a really uncomfortable place to be. And same can be said about folks who deal with trauma as well. And so using the 5 senses and some mindfulness strategies can really be helpful for folks struggling with those kinds of things. And this client, after she would walk 20 minutes a day, put her cell phone away, outdoors, using her 5 senses. I used this mindful nature walk script that actually I brought today if anyone's interested in having one for themselves. Her symptoms for the first time, in years after being on lots of medications for this, really started to improve in ways in which she was able to function, take care of her kids, and go back to work in a way that was just pretty incredible. And like you said, just another example, I think, of the power of this kind of thing. If we can step away from all the big money from pharma, and try some other things, at least in addition to that, if not instead of that, I think we can really get back to nature and hopefully, find ourselves more healthy over time. So what I'd like you all, I guess, to take from this is to think about, yourselves when you're struggling with depression, anxiety, low energy, difficulty concentrating, whatever might be going on, and prescribe some nature for yourself or for your loved one who might be struggling, or ask your doctor about it too. 80% of the antidepressants that are prescribed in this country are prescribed not even by psychiatrists, but by physicians and family doctors. And so, the more and more, they're getting these ideas, and I think doing other sort of behavioral and things that are in line with what I'm talking about here. But ask about it and encourage your loved ones to do that as well. Or get out and walk yourself and see what happens for you with that. So let me pass around this script, and we have a very short time to talk today, but if you have questions, I'm happy to take them after the rest of the folks talk. So thank you.
So I'm Susan Wolverton here from Coe College. I'm a professor of theater arts at Coe, but I wear many hats at Coe, and one of those hats is as the faculty advisor for the Environmental Club. And also at Coe, we teach first-year seminars, and in that program, you're allowed to teach anything that you're passionate about. So I'm passionate about the environment, and a few years ago, the summer reading was Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma. That was maybe back in, that came out in 2007 or so. And so that was the reading that all students were doing at Coe, and I aligned my course with that teaching with food and food systems in general. And so I've been teaching that class every other year for about 17 years, and have also served and started the Sustainability Council at Coe with our former president, and encouraged our former president Pfeiffer to sign the campus climate commitment. So I've been sort of a leader on the campus, again, because at a small college you can take on these different roles and really make a difference. So I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about some of the things we've done at Coe, but also something very exciting happening, a partnership with Iowa State and the Agricultural Toolkit and Blue Zones. Coe was one of 5 institutions in the city selected for the Blue Zones at Iowa State collaboration. And I want to talk about how I think it was that we came to that place and how we can reach out and be really a leader in the community. So about 7 years ago, there was a lot of interest at Coe from students coming and saying, we would like to have a garden at Coe. We'd really like to, and that was when really school gardens really were taking off around the country. And so with the help of my help and the food service, we established a garden at Coe, and it was essentially an edible landscape, as a garden is. But I started teaching this class and laying the groundwork really for getting students more involved, actually getting out of the classroom and putting some things into practice. So the first year seminar I taught, I had them going out, and it's kind of hard to see in this light, but We went over with, worked with Matthew 25, a great institution. It was at that time starting the urban farm. So we volunteered there, and students, some of whom had come from a farming background, but hadn't really put the idea of doing gardening or farming in the urban setting together. You know, that was something they hadn't thought about. Or students who maybe came from a small town and their grandmother had done gardening, but they hadn't really been out and done that themselves. So there was really a lack of connection, but they seemed really hungry to do that. So we went out to Matthew 25, we went over, did a field trip to Bass Farms, and it was just really invigorating to see these first year students get out of the books and get excited about doing something that they could do something at the end of the day to see something they'd accomplished. Then I also started working with Fred Meyer, Backyard Abundance in Iowa City, and he has really, in this area, been key, I think, in getting the idea of permaculture established. And at that time, he was just starting out, and I invited him to come as a speaker, and we designed projects. So their final project was to choose a little corner of campus and design a permaculture garden. You know, Pro is a very green campus, but it's green in the sense that there's a lot of monocrop. I mean, bluegrass and some pretty trees, but we also have areas that are just sort of dead and uninteresting and maybe wasted space. So with this edible landscape project, I asked them to work in teams and identify, you know, areas like this in front of a building that were just a square of grass, and come up with a design that we wouldn't necessarily be able to follow through on in that short semester, but they at least had the experience of doing the research, determining what plants would go in and why. This was a couple of nursing students, or students who wanted to be nurses. One woman in particular wanted to be a midwife, and she had then designed this to be a healing garden. So she had anise hyssop and chamomile and New Jersey tea, and laid it all out in with colors, thinking that this would be a low-growing but a beneficial, kind of edible, and healing space. Another student saw this is near our science building, right where our greenhouse is, but it always sort of looked like this. Not very alive. And so he was also near Cherry Auditorium, so he called it the Cherry Garden. And so he had some cherry trees in there. He was very innovative in what he chose. A bench, wild ginger, things, some I think raspberries, things that could take the shade, also made it that wouldn't need, that could adapt to the kind of soil that was there. And so this was his design. And then I had a student come forward who was not in my class, but was part of the environmental club, and he really wanted to do a permaculture garden on campus for real. And so he said, you know, what can we do? So we went to the president, and we identified a place near a dorm. This kind of oblong piece of grass was always burning out. They kept tearing out the sod and putting in new sod, and it would burn out. And they piled up snow in the winter, and there was salt. And it was just not a successful space at all. And so we identified this as being a space that we could then use as a project. So again, working with Fred and the environmental club and staff and students, we did the permaculture method is essentially to get a group, a community together, and it's not one designer coming up with an idea, it's the community deciding what is it that this should look like. So we went through that process for several meetings. Students listed the kinds of things they'd like to see there. Faculty and staff weighed in. And Fred went away with all the things that we'd written up on, you know, poster boards, and came away with a design that we then were able to implement slowly. We selected the plants that we thought would do well. It would, permaculture, if you don't know, is essentially mimicking nature. So you've got some plants that are going to bring nutrients up, some plants that are going to provide shade, you're going to have edibles. It's essentially an edible space. So in the fall, we prepped that space. This is just in one afternoon on a weekend. We got the wonderful black gold from the city, that compost that is just terrific. And then started layering that up, doing sheet mulching and the compost, and then just let it cook over the winter. And then we came back in that spring of that year and started planting. And that was, lost a little bit of track of time, but I think it was only about 3 years ago. And now it is grown up, and there are pear trees, there's two pear, well, one pear tree died, we have to replace that. But we have pear tree, comfrey, yarrow, all kinds of things, terrific pollinators. So in the summer, this place is just alive with butterflies and bees and all kinds of activity. The squirrels keep taking the strawberries out, so I'm putting those back in. But the arcania berries, there are things starting to yield in this particular garden. So that's the kind of background that I kind of laid that groundwork for students at Co. And then when Blue Zones started to become a thing, we had a couple of students who started a Blue Zones Club, and they got recognized and started being recognized in Cedar Rapids. So when this all came about, we started going to meetings with the Food Alliance and Blue Zones, and in that process, we're identified as a place that Iowa State would then work with us to create a sustainable landscape, and edibles in particular. But they were looking for a place that was going to be a good location, that would offer educational opportunities, but also a way to get out of that co-bubble, get our students out and interact with our community. So we've just gone through that process with Iowa State of identifying, again, with the co-community and students. We looked at the campus and said, where are the places on campus that we really want to focus? And in that process, there's one area down near the EB Field House. There's a bell that students ring as they come in. As new students, they all ring that bell. And then 4 years later, or whenever they graduate, they ring that bell again. So it's a really important place for the students. But it's also an area that right now is not very interesting. There's a slope that just sort of burns out. And there are some stormwater issues and some drainage issues. So this is an area that we identified that really could benefit from an edible landscape. And so Iowa State, the team, with, again, this process of we tell them what we like to see. They came up with some designs. And I'll talk a little bit later about coming back to this idea. Then for a long time at Co, if you know Co, the union has a low flat roof, just calling out for a green roof. And we had done studies, and doing that, weren't quite ready to do it. Students identified that as one key area they wanted to see happen. So then there's a design there for a green roof and also some espalier pear trees up on this really ugly entrance we have. So making a kind of a not so attractive area beautiful and also yielding edibles. One idea that I love is we have, again, a big old open space near some of our new apartments, turning that into an edible arboretum, and in fact turning the entire campus into an arboretum where everything would be labeled. So anyone visiting our campus, it's suddenly the library is outdoors, like everything would be labeled. But there'd be fruit trees in here, and these are spaces that suddenly become outdoor living spaces for students to still play, but also study. And then a storm management place also near an area that gets a lot of runoff near our science buildings. So these are exciting projects that now the next steps, I'd long had this idea that really Co should have an urban field station. We have a wilderness field station in northern Minnesota that has been highly regarded, but in an urban setting, why not make our own campus a big outdoor learning space so that we could partner not only for our students, but for area high schools or area schools children or community members to come in and learn from what we're doing, or we learn from them. So we're now focusing in on that Bell area, and in fact on Monday I'm meeting with the president in Iowa State to see, okay, next step, we want to start directing some of our funds and our strategic plan into making this happen. I'm teaching a May term in spring. I'm going to use those 8 students to start to implement that. That's what excites me is taking something and making it really happen. And having the students come away seeing that they've been a part of it, they've learned from it. And we as small colleges are challenged by distance learning. That's not something you can learn from a computer. You've got to be out there doing it. So I think this is the way that we're going to achieve that and stay viable. So finally, I'll leave you with kale. It was a great year for kale. I mean, you've grown gardens, yes, you know. This is some kale out of a garden that was supported by a grant from Soilmates. And then the pear tree, I think, is going to bear fruit, yes, this fall. So we get those images of edible and educational benefits. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Great, the sun came out. So, what lovely and interesting and diverse presentations, huh?
Yes.
Scott said his grandma told him, plant a tree and be nice. You don't mind, Tony? Who shrug your shoulders at me? How long were you in Senegal?
A year and a half. I had to come home a little early because of some intestinal issues.
Yeah. I've been to
But yeah,
Senegal.
this was 86, 87.
Yeah. I've been to Senegal too. It's a wonderful,
I love it.
diverse, interesting landscape with really interesting people. You get a different feel for connecting with nature in many places in Africa, especially in my experience, especially in West Africa. Everyone should just stop. We should just stop for a minute and look out the window. Look at that view. The sunlight coming, the low sunlight making the long shadows, and the George hills in the back. It's really quite lovely, isn't it? Yeah, that'd be a nice place to have a classroom, wouldn't it?
Because golf is not nature.
Warning, golf is not nature. I like that joy. Joy, I really appreciated your presentation and the depth of knowledge you've got about the research literature in this area. Most practitioners don't have nearly that depth, and I really appreciate that. And I noticed the paper you cited on rumination. That's brand spanking new, so you're really keeping your fingers on the pulse. Social standards. So, I've long wanted to do a study that looks at like couples counseling and randomly assign a group, a set of couples to do kind of traditional couples therapy, and then have another group that's randomly assigned to do exactly the traditional couples therapy, but do some component of it while they're walking in the green landscape. I've long had the sense that it's easier to deal with difficult issues when you're in an environment like that.
I would oftentimes have to get out of my office when I've got some couples issues going on.
Yeah. And Susan, I really appreciate, wow, you're a professor of theater, and now you're learning all kinds of issues about sustainability and landscape architecture and design and planning and soil and so on. So you're quite a Renaissance scholar and leader, I think.
That's Co in a nutshell.
Yeah. Always lucky to have you. Yeah. It sounds like you've got a number of really interesting, engaging, hands-on activities that how can you not learn from doing those things, from planting seeds, from kind of learning how the compost grows or is made. So those are really wonderful things. So what I'd like to do now is think about in your own experiences, what are some of the most effective experiences that you've had as individuals participating in or facilitating learning about anything, any topic. So it could be learning about composting, or it could be learning about soil science, or about yourself, or the larger context, or climate change, in a environment that includes or is centered around nature. And what I'd like you to do is take about 5 or 8 minutes to talk in groups of 2 or 3 and share some of these ideas with one another. And then let's bring it back together and share some of the best ones with each other, okay? Is that all right? On the count of three. Wait a minute, don't
I'm
start
going to
before
tell you
three.
no.
On the count of three, form your groups. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay,
Any groups want to start?
which group wants to start? Okay, tell us what you found in the back. Yes, I'm sorry, they can't. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, we were mostly sharing memories of not seeing nature before learning, and how our experience growing up in school was, it was what it still is today, quite a bit of it. But our home lives were nature-based and nature-oriented, and that's become, I feel like this is the choir. We kind of decided this is the choir that we're talking about. And so it is intuitive to us to go out into nature when we're stressed and seek relief, and intuitive to know that that is a source of relaxation and inspiration.
Okay, good. And you guys had a similar reaction.
Yes, the first thing is we all sat here for a little bit and had to think about it. And when I think of formal learning, I think like hotel ballrooms and classrooms and, when we go to conferences and that kind of thing. We had the experiences we thought of was Earth Day in 5th grade, which they did topography outside. And yours was Girl Scouts, so there's formal learning there. And I thought of a conference I just went to, the Shiro experience at Camp Wapsie this past year, which was incredible. But that's maybe one of the first kind of formal things I did outside, so it's kind of sad that we had to think so hard about it.
We did talk about, Kelly talk about both having elementary schools that were very old with big windows and actually had large trees outside, and the fact that you were kind of cautioned you weren't supposed to look out the window.
Can I mention windows real quick? Over Thanksgiving break, I built a greenhouse out of pallets and windows. So I salvage old windows, big ones, old thick ones from when they remodeled schools and stuff, and collect them. And you guys, and I do this with season extensions on garden stuff. It's so cute. Little tiny hobbit house with just a 4-foot pallet that's wired together like 4 by 12, and then just put windows on top. And you can just build a greenhouse for like garbage money,
Scott, there's a lot of money in garbage.
From the man who knows. I just want to touch base. Did you guys have any reactions so far? You don't have to have a reaction, but I want to make sure you can react if you'd like to.
I think that's what we talked about in our group too, was unfortunately the lack of experience, doing formal learning outside. Yeah.
So when in doing the research on schools, the second project I presented today with the classroom views, that was actually the second project we did. We got a grant, actually do a different project. The different project was to identify 36 schools in Illinois, 12 of which were already green, and then 24 that were barren that we could put a lot of plants in around, and then follow those 3 categories of schools for a decade and see if the scores, standardized test scores that were being generated out of the schools differed over time, especially where we did the planting. And if they moved more towards the places that were greener, the 12 schools that were greener. We did not do that study. You know why?
I think I might know why. Go ahead.
We could not find 24 schools that were barren. It was easy to find 24 schools that were in essentially barren landscapes, but they had so few windows that if you were to randomly choose 12 of those and do a big planting run, you had no sense that the kids would actually have that connection to the planting. Isn't that terrible?
What I was going to say was the answer to that was a dynamic I'm dealing with, because I'm not just in one district, I'm in several districts in the corridor. It's very different from district to district, school to school, principal to principal, teacher to teacher. Communities are very different, codes are different, policies are different, municipal, whatever. The preaching of the choir thing is really important to acknowledge, because what we're asking for at a larger level is a cultural mindset shift in the way we think about our priorities and values. And so when it comes to, in our group, talking about the politics of curriculum development, for instance, that Biochem 101 for botany that I just said, that's not taught. And there's a reason why it's not taught. I'm not going to get into that. But what I'm saying is that when I come in as a guest itinerant and try to introduce something that's not in their core, I'm infringing on their core. Well, they got to get over that, okay? And also they need to prioritize with grounds crews, maintenance crews. There are some schools that don't want the garden, okay? So let's acknowledge that too. So then I have to back up and try to convince them that, and that's why I say start small and get smaller. I do a tiny little veggie bed with some flowers and herbs. Come on, you guys, it's just this little bed. Let's start with that. Take some lesson plans to that. See how that goes. Build community partnership to see it. Give yourself some wiggle room so that when you map it out, you know that if this goes well, we can expand it. But I just wanted to acknowledge both the politics of curriculum development and just the budgets and policies of grounds care maintenance.
So one of my most intense and interesting experiences I've had with respect to these kinds of issues is I teach at a state of Illinois penitentiary. I've taught in a medium high security penitentiary in Illinois since 2008. And I teach some of the same classes that I teach on the U of I campus at the prison. So last semester, for instance, I taught on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I taught my environmental sustainability class on campus, and on Friday night from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, I taught the same class in the prison. And prison is such an awful place. And I mean, if you would design a place to produce mental illness, you would start with the penal system in the state of Illinois. And we have this myth that we tell each other about how, we're going to send this person to prison, we're going to incarcerate them for 3 years or 20 years or 40 years, and in that process somehow they're going to come out and be a better person. They're going to be somebody we might want to have as a neighbor. It's an outrageous premise. We should all laugh at it. And the landscape within the prison is something that should appall us as well. It's
trees, you can't clean out.
well, they cut the trees down. When I first started at the prison in Danville, there were 22 trees, smaller trees, Bradford pear-like trees on the inside. But they had a warden come in and he didn't like the trees. And within a week period, they were all cut down. 22 trees were cut down, and it made it even more hostile, ridiculous place. But we did. They were always complaining about the amount of money that they just never had money. Well, at the prison I teach at in Danville, they serve 6,000 meals a day. Can you imagine the food waste? 6,000 meals a day. And they had this huge tank, this big tank that held, I don't know how many gallons of food waste. And they paid $52,000 a year to a private contractor who had a truck big enough. He would come in, he would pick up the tank, he would drive it to the Vermilion County landfill, he would dump it, and then he would return the tank, that day, $52,000 a year, because he would come every other week, and it seems like a lot of money, but that's what they spent. So we were talking with them one day, we were talking with the wardens one day, and we said, that what's in that tank is a resource for you. You could use that, and you could actually use it in a very positive way. And they actually let us do this experiment in which we collected food scraps from the kitchen. They wouldn't let us do it from the cafeteria because that was too complicated. But from the kitchen, and so we would get like 110 gallons of scrap from the kitchen every single day. And we built some bins in the back, and
Awesome.
we taught it.
That's awesome.
We taught a class around this that talked about biology and sustainability and put all this stuff together, and we taught the guys how to actually do the recipe for
nitrogen.
Yeah, and we used, so they have a lot of scrap paper that they shred
Yeah,
in the
for
prison.
sure, yeah.
So then we used that as the carbon. And,
Well, I loved you the minute I said that. You had me at soil.
and you know what? And we produced this incredibly rich, wonderful, beautiful compost that came out of it. And the guys were gaining a really interesting experience, and they felt that they were doing something positive, making some positive. And then we started a garden, and the garden grew, and then they hired a horticulture professor from the community college to use the compost to teach this. And it was very, and then they got a new warden.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and then the warden said, no, we're not doing that.
Well,
And the whole composting thing got shut down in one moment in which the new warden said, we're not doing that anymore. We're not having guys walk around with shovels and doing this.
Yeah.
And it stopped. It was, to me, it was like such an awful thing, because here you had human beings who could actually have a productive activity that they could do, actually something positive. And that was taken away because the new warden had a notion that that was not a good, useful thing.
the nurturance transference thing I was
Yeah,
talking about is
yeah.
something that, and then the tone with which we talk about this stuff is important to me too. The older I get, I'm hopefully getting a little bit better. I've been a hothead for, as a younger man. I think I'm 54 this year, so I'm getting a little better at trying to phrase things in a more inclusive, big tent, less divisive rhetoric, while being true to my principles. But when you're talking about, there's a time to get angry, but there's also, I have found two things that I can bring people together on, almost on any issue with this divisiveness, and that's the idea of the wisdom of diversity. So for instance, I've got row crop farmers in my own family where I'm an organic educator, they're not, but we can agree on two things. Cost savings, I can show them they can save money, we all want to save money, with the methods I'm using, letting nature take care of nature. And the second one is, I told my brother's stepfather once, we were sitting around the table, and he said, because it's just corn and soy, and I go, well, you're putting all your eggs in one basket, really, because 100 years ago in Iowa in 1915, farms had 40 different species of plants, now we're down to 2. I said, do you only have one thing in your investment portfolio? No. Yeah, you're right, that's not smart. Do you only eat one thing? No, you're right, Scott, that's not smart. I goes, well, why do you only grow 2 plants? We need to maximize biodiversity in our diet, our ecosystem, and I have found, for whatever it's worth, that if I can bring people together over those 2 concepts, let's save money and let's honor diversity, then we can leave the room and, agree on something.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
I've got 2 things real quick. I've known Scott for a while, and I don't know, I've seen you in moments where I thought you were going to use an apple as a weapon. But I wanted to share a story about Scott, if I can, because Scott's one of the few guys that can actually get me a little bit emotional, and I'm pretty stable emotionally. And I tend to think I'm very excited in what I do. I taught 2nd grade for 10 years before taking a job at the landfill as an environmental educator. And so Scott helps me with a very large educational program where just about every 6th grader in Linn County comes through and spends half a day learning environmental science in 4 different main areas. And one of those areas is composting. And I have employed Scott to come out and take care of that for me. And I remember a couple of years ago coming down off of the big landfill hill with an entire bus full of nearly 70 children, explaining to them how you should not use the word dirt. It's offensive to Scott. Scott is a really great friend of mine. He's a very, very enthusiastic speaker, giving them the heads up. And you don't know this because I've never told you this.
Oh, no.
But we get down the hill and around the corner to where we're producing the composting that we're doing. And this is one of the largest composting facilities in the region. And I can't find Scott anywhere. I don't see him anywhere near where he's supposed to be, and the kids are like, where is this guy? Where is this guy? I'm like, oh, I see there's a guy laying in the compost. And he's just laid, sprawled out, enjoying the view of the sky in the windrow, 100-yard long windrow, 12 feet up off the ground in the compost. It was I always think about that whenever I'm in my down moments, not wanting Scott laying back, looking at the sky. So that's always stuck with me, but when I was teaching, at the beginning of my career teaching, I taught at a school right near Large Park, it's Knoll Ridge Park, if anyone's familiar with that area of town. And I used to take my class over into Knoll Ridge Park. And we would just do whatever it was we were doing that day, science, math, social, it didn't matter. And we would spend that time in Knoll Ridge Park. About 4 years into my teaching career, I wasn't allowed to do that anymore because it's not technically the school's property, so I needed a field trip form. So I'm thinking in all my genius, I'll just get a field trip form, that's no big deal. But I realized I was going over there, you know, every other week or once a week-ish. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, why is that teacher taking 40 field trips a year? You can't do that. And then on a technicality of the word field trip and the property lines, I lost the ability to take my kids to the giant, open, awesome scape that is there at Knoll Ridge. It was, I mean, less than 100 yards from my window of my classroom. And so that's one of my more frustrating moments on the education side of things with nature.
Yeah, there's a certain level of, we need to bring some reasonableness back into this whole.
It's like you employed me to teach and nurture and keep these, 25 children safe. And I can't do it 100 yards over there.
For whatever it's worth, we're in a large district where they're feeding 14,000 lunches a day, and Iowa City, we got 7,000. When I go to the corridor to go to the food deserts, to the small schools, the one Joyce I was telling you about today was in 2012, their last senior class had 12 kids. Okay, those are the districts that roll out the red carpet for Soilmates. They will let me do whatever the hell I want to do because, and again, I'm just anecdotal, but the large districts have a political mechanism, dynamic that's much more top down. We know what we're doing. I go down the road a half an hour to Olin, Iowa, and there's like, come on in, we want to welcome you with open arms and do the very thing that Cedar Rapids doesn't want me to do.
Tony.
So well, let's deal with that then. There are ways that are concerned. There are ways to manage those concerns without meaning you have to stop the process. That's why I encourage the principal to Google this stuff again. Get a hold of this principal I'm working with over here and find out how he managed those concerns that you're all freaked out about.
Tell a story.
Yeah.
So if our assignment is to leave here with 3,
We need to develop 3 things that we would like the other people to know, or common threads that we've discussed. So that's our assignment. We have about 9 minutes.
Soil is good.
Nice.
Be nice. Good. Don't say dirt.
Actually, there's a really good book called Dirt that I recommend to everybody. Sorry, Scott.
I don't know if I know what this is.
Snap. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but.
All right, well, soil is good.
Priorities, writ large, I think, are
What's that?
just the public policy priorities and budgets. I always like to bring budgets into this conference so that we can walk away, go into our respective leaders and saying, we want you to line item this work into your 2017 budget because the 2016 budget's already in the can.
I think that relates to, big money pharma too, how that drives a lot of our healthcare. And so, it's about.
Just get out there in nature.
Exactly.
It's free, yeah. So the healing power of nature, I think that's what you talked about and we talked about. And it's kind of a no-brainer, but somehow we called it.
Golf is not nature.
Yeah. There's a beautiful courses out there. Enjoy all the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some green designs that increasingly, my brother's a pro-am golfer, so I caddy for him for tournaments. And there are more courses that are trying to be more drought tolerant and less pesticide and stuff too. So hats off to those designers.
The one thing that struck me as a common theme of all of these is connecting. Connecting people, getting them out of the therapy with the students, so, connecting people with the soil. It's the hands-on stuff. You learn a lot more when you actually do it out there.
And everybody has something to gain by access to nature, whether it's a co-student, an alum, whether it's somebody struggling with mental health issues, whether it's a child, whether it's a prisoner. I mean, it really just spans through all of our different professions and every walk of life. There's nobody who doesn't have something to gain from this. It's not an exclusive conversation. I read a recent article as well about assisting vets to recuperate on a return. And understanding a small group, perhaps buddies that can move forward together and send them out into nature to experience that again and sort of relate just doing so. So it's everybody. So why do we get away from this?
My soil science hero is Dr. Linn Ingham. She pioneered in the 1970s a soil food web that I teach. We all teach photosynthesis, but we don't teach enough about what's happening where the soil meets the root is the name of my class for the high school kids. I would encourage all of you, if you've never done it, because we're trying to get more microscopes into the classrooms through the National Center for Science Education. 400x. I've talked to Laura about this too, Joyce, people who've heard me. If you've never seen the living, breathing, hydrating organism of soil at that magnification, I encourage you to try to do that. I don't care if you can YouTube it or whatever, but just Google Dr. Elaine Ingham, Soil Food Web. You'll go right to her website. And I'm telling you, when children, in my experience, can see for the first time, because I stand on the other side of the microscope intentionally, and they'll look down in that, and then they pop their head up, and their eyes just pop open, and they go, "It's alive!" And I go, "That's what I'm trying to tell you. This is where it starts. We can help it or hurt it if we don't honor the microbial diversity in that soil that is creating the very nutrients that are now available to be absorbed into the permeable membrane of the root. Then we're not here because all of our food comes from plants. When kids say, sometimes a kid says, "No way, the meat's not a plant." I go, "I know the meat's not a plant, but what's the meat eating?"
Right.
"Oh yeah, the cow. Oh yeah, the cow's got its head in the grass." And I go, "Yeah, what's the grass?" "It's a plant." But what's the plant eating? And that's where I encourage you to take not just a soil smear, but take a root with an aggregate colloid on it of healthy soil. Slide that under there and crank it up, and I'm telling you, you will see that door opening and closing to give us life.
So you can answer that first one, soil is good and so are roots.
The research on microbes and roots just blow me away. This is an awesome conference. This has been a really inspirational, affirmative day for me personally. Thank you so much for coming.
You can also add the soil is good, soil is healing. I mean,
Soil's
that's
good
common
and
ground.
alive and healing. There you go.
In soil, we also change systems. Anecdotally, my wife started edible landscaping on half of our front yard about 5 or 6 years ago. She didn't know that that was illegal, that you're supposed to have grass in your yard. And so last year, she said, "Oh, you know, the city now says this is okay." Because people were planting things in the right of way, flower gardens and other things, and other people were doing edible landscaping, and there was an urban gardening push that beset Cedar Rapids, and so going back to the soil in a way is going to change the systems that we live with.
This is the International Year of Soil through the UN. And Cedar Rapids, after the floods of 2008, you should know, was the first city municipality in this region to actually enact, through Matthew 25 that I work with too, an urban ag ordinance that codifies some of these very sticky little issues about public, ways and dimensions and proximity to, but just, I grew up here. I'm a Cedar Rapids boy, Coolidge, Taft, Jefferson. And my goodness, I came back to my hometown and it was both for good and worse. Much more violent than when I grew up here. But on the other hand, it was the first city to do curbside yard waste collection for composting, first city to enact an urban chicken ordinance, first city to do an urban ag ordinance. I'm like, this is Cedar Rapids? This is not the Cedar Rapids I remember when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s. My goodness. So.
Well, with that, we'll close. And this time slot is the most feared on any agenda, is the after lunch time slot. and yet to have this exciting and engaging time with these panelists, I want to thank them again for making this so much fun. our